Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on this Ecoboost swapped Ranger again. If you followed the channel before or saw some of my other videos, had a full build series on this Ecoboost swapped Ranger. It's a 1994 Ranger with a 2.3 Ecoboost and 6-speed transmission out of a 2016 Mustang. Did the full swap, took it racing, drag racing, went down to the duct tape drags in Arizona, pulled out a 12.4 quarter mile. Did really good. Then afterwards I spun a rod bearing and here it sits. So it still runs, just a slight rod bearing noise, but it's time to replace the engine. I have another wrecking yard engine out of a 2017 Mustang that I bought the whole car again. And this time the engine doesn't have a cracked oil pan, so that's going to hopefully be better off in the long run and not spin another rod bearing. I would have liked to go with the built engine, but just wasn't in the budget. I'll go ahead and show you some of the other goodies we got. Got a passenger seat here full of parts. Have a new precision upgraded, I think it's the NX2 Turbo. It's supposed to be one of the better factory upgrades. Helps with the top end and all that stuff. Got motive gears and a Detroit True Track locker, or Posi-Track, whatever you want to call it. We're switching out the rear gear to a 355, because this one here is 410. Which I thought was going to be a good gear ratio, but it's just too low for this setup. The first gear in this 6-speed is quite low, so when I was starting at the drag strip racing, it was starting in second gear. So hopefully by going to a 355, I'll be able to improve that all around. It'll be better cruising and all that stuff. But even with the 410 gear, I got like 23, 25 miles a gallon, which is pretty good. Other upgrade is going to be cow tracks in the rear. I had my own traction bar set up, but the way it was designed, ended up bending my leaf springs, so that wasn't any good. So I got new leaf springs, going to be buying some cow tracks, and then this is a newer style front end with dual piston calipers, so hopefully improve the braking on the front. Going to be upgrading the rotors, hopefully to a larger size, and doing some modifications there to improve the braking on here. And then replacing all the coil springs and leaf springs all the way around, because something about this truck, it always kind of leaned to one side. So hopefully by replacing that, I'll be able to fix that. And there'll be other things along the way that are going to be improving on this, little things that just weren't quite finished or needed some improvement. But to start this thing off, we're going to pull the bed off, at least the canopy and the stuff out, pull the bed off, measure up for some cow tracks, and then pull the rear axle out, re-gear it. Once that's done, put the axle back in, roll the truck into the shop, pull the cab off, and do the engine swap. So I made a bit of progress on this, got the rear axle out, all the brakes tucked up, everything disconnected back here, and then did a bunch of work up here, got the radiator out, wiring disconnected, brake lines, fuel lines, just pretty much everything that I could see needs to be disconnected. Got that done. Body's unbolted right now. Inside the cab there is all done up, some brake lines disconnected in there. Only thing left is a brake line fitting there. I got to get a plug from the parts store, waiting on that to come in. But right now, gonna get this rolled out of the shop and the cab lifted off, and then we can roll the chassis back in and work on swapping out this engine. Got the chassis back in the shop, gonna work on pulling the engine out. Before I get to that point, I went ahead and welded this jig on the front here, because I'm gonna redesign my motor mounts, and I wanna be able to unbolt those and keep the engine in the same spot. then I could fabricate up new one or test fit new ones and make sure it's all going to line up the same and that the engine's going to stay in the same spot. So I just did some simple box tube bolted to some existing holes in the frame, and then up top here on the front of the engine, and weld that solid. Now I can come in here, probably see about taking the turbocharger off so I got more room over in here, and then probably this intake plenum so I have more room to get to this one. Just want to make sure that my the idea behind the new motor mounts is the old ones, I don't know how you can see this, utilize the factory frame side perches that were for a 4-cylinder only, and then I made little brackets that went to this engine. But what I like to do is design a bracket that's universal to no matter what engine came in your truck. I could sell those to people to do the same swap. So I'll be not improvising, but improving my design. So even if you came with a 4.0, you just unbolt your frame side perches, bolt these mounts in, and it'll be good to go. The one I designed this was limited to having a 2.3 4-cylinder truck as a donor. So going to be revamping those motor mounts, also redoing this alternator bracket. It works good, but I'm just looking at this and there's some room for improvement, a little more gusseting and stuff like that and adjustments. So gonna get some of the stuff taken off and start doing some test fitting. So I got a bunch more taken off of this truck since the last clip. We'll start with the engine here. Got the intake on this side and the turbo on the other side. And I think I finalized my motor mount design. These are 3D printed, makes it easier to prototype stuff. Go ahead and look at this other side. This one's pretty well finalized too. There'll be a little bit of changes on it. And once I get that finalized, I'll go ahead and get those cut out in metal. And the whole idea behind this is so I can sell these brackets, so it's a more universal fit up if someone wants to do this swap, and also be selling that rear cross member and some other brackets on here. So I think I got those finalized, going to be moving forward with that. As you can see, the front suspension's out of this, and a good reason for that. This is the factory Ranger brakes and all that stuff. This is just using a single piston caliper, and it works all right for stock, but when I'm going 120 down the drag strip and got to stop at the other end, it's not quite what I need for brakes. Going to do a upgrade to a 96 to 90 or 95 to 97 Ranger. Use dual piston calipers, and that requires a different spindle. So we getting those put on there. I actually have the arms and everything going to be switching over, but they're the twin traction beam stuff, they're sitting outside. So I'm going to be bringing that in, swapping that all over. So get dual piston front calipers, a little better braking there. And additionally, if you go online and search Ford Ranger brake upgrade or Sport Track Ranger brake upgrade, you'll see there's some forum stuff like the Ranger Station on upgrading your front rotors from a 2004-ish Sport Track onto the Ranger spindles to increase your brake rotor size. So I think the factory is about 10.5 and these are 12. So you get a larger brake rotor, which helps with your braking. And to do that, this isn't my own design, it's kind of a copy of what the forum had on it, but they kind of have instruction on this. You have a bracket, which will go in here, maybe. There we go. And this one's 3D printed, eventually will get made out of metal. But pretty much what this does is it offsets your caliper to accommodate the larger brakes rotor. And that should, in theory, give you better braking. So that's going to be a full front suspension upgrade, better brakes, better stopping, and just redoing everything as I go. Got new ball joints and new bearings and all that stuff. So we'll get that bolted up in the front, have that all done up. The next thing is I got the new, well, they're not new, but they're different, not bent leaf springs put in the back and the start of a Caltrax kit on here. Waiting for my differential to come back from getting re-geared, and once that happens, I'll bolt that in and finish bolting up the Caltrax. So I got the chassis rolled back in the shop and the new engine bolted in. Utilized my new motor mounts. You can take a look at them there. Hopefully the lighting's decent enough. I will have these for sale on my website, so if you want to do a swap like this, I'll have those available to buy, along with this alternator relocation bracket. Originally it was on this side of the engine, which interferes with the steering box. Got this bracket that moves it to this side, and it's works out pretty good, quite stout. Other thing I'll also be selling is this rear cross member. Right now I have one for manual transmission. Eventually I'll have one for the automatic transmission if you want to run the factory automatic, which depending on what you do, if you're doing straight drag racing, I'd honestly probably go with the automatic. You're probably going to get faster and more reliable times than with the manual transmission, but this is always fun to drive with the manual. Anyway, so I'll put a link in the description for my website if you want to buy brackets to do your swap on your own Ranger. Don't quote me, but the frames bracket should interchange from 83 to 97 as long as it has the twin traction beam front suspension. I'll have to do some more research, and I'll put the year range when I actually list these for sale on my website. But next thing here is modifying the exhaust. This downpipe was off the factory Mustang, and it was only like 2 3/8, and then I grafted into the 3-inch. So it was never the best flowing, I guess. It's always an upgrade to upgrade your downpipe. So the car I got this engine out of had a 3-inch downpipe on there, so I'm going to graft that into this exhaust system, probably cut off right about in there, weld that in, and then the next thing is to weld a V-band clamp onto this joint back here because this thing kept falling apart, especially when I went down to Arizona. In the last 200 miles of my trip, I had to drive with no muffler, and it was quite loud, and I'm sure the people on the interstate loved it. So going to V-band clamps so that stays together, upgrading the exhaust, and then next step is to get the cab mounted on here and start hooking stuff up. So as you can see, made a lot of progress on this. Got the full body back on the truck. The bed's bolted down, the cab's bolted down, adjusted cowl tracks in the rear. Got some of the interior stuff hooked up. All the brake lines hooked back up. The back of the truck sits a little high after doing the spring swap, so maybe it'll level out from driving, or just these ones aren't worn out like the other ones. So under the hood, got everything pretty much connected back up. There's a lot to hook back up. Luckily, I took a bunch of photos so I knew what went where. Did some modifications like this upper radiator tube here. Previously, the factory one was kind of up over in here, and then I had to have this sharp dog leg to get to the radiator spout. So took 2 of these upper radiator tubes from the Ecoboost, extended this one, and I think shortened it someplace. Anyway, modified that so it worked out. Did some other modifications. Still waiting to hook up the master cylinder. I'm upgrading, since I upgraded the front brakes, I'm upgrading the master cylinder to one out of a 96 that matches the larger front brakes. So I think it's a slightly bigger bore. In the process of doing that, of course, they switched from a standard inverted flare fitting to a metric bubble flare, so I'm waiting on adapters before I can put that in. But pretty much it's getting pretty close to starting. Swapped out the Optima battery for, well, really warrantied out. The other one had a dead cell. It was only 2 years old. So I'm going to start looking for something better than Optima's. Their quality's dropped. If any of you know a good replacement quality AGM battery that's better than Optima, let me know down in the comments, because I see a lot online. These things were good 10 years ago, but now the quality sucks. The one that I replaced was 2 years old, and it had a dead cell in it, and this thing's really hardly been used, so it really didn't have a whole lot of cycles and abuse on it. But anyway, got the radiator filled up with water, fuel line's hooked up, oil in it. I'm going to cycle the key to check for fuel leaks and probably unplug the ignition coils and crank it over just to prime the oiling system, because everything's pretty much empty. I got a new turbo on there and it doesn't have any oil in it. Doing an oil change, so there's oil that needs to go on the filter and all the lines and all that stuff. So just cranking it over without it starting up is going to help circulate it without putting any major load on it. So I'll put you guys on a tripod and get that stuff going here. A little smoky, I assume it's just some junk burning out the tailpipe. It's been a few weeks since that last clip. The smoke cleared up pretty easily, just probably some excess oil and the exhaust burning off. I've put about 1,500 miles on this thing. Since then, drives good, runs good, all's running like it was before, minus the engine knock. Got a new tune for this thing to compensate for the new turbo, running a lot better. Took it to the Woodburn drag strip. Only pulled out a 13.1, so not the best time on it, but I was running street tires and it was an unprepped track, so I was spinning constantly off the line. Last time I had this out on street tires, I was like a 13.6, so about a half a second gain just by upgrading the turbo. I'm working on an E30 tune right now, so I have plans to take this back out to the drag strip with slicks on it, a prep track, hopefully breaking the 11s, should be pretty close to that. Also got plans for cooling on the intercooler, needs a little help, but that's another video. Truck still needs a few things. The leaf springs in the back aren't right. Turns out that the little bit newer year Ranger uses a different leaf spring, and so it sits too high in the back. Working on getting some the correct ones. Seem to be hard to come by new, but anyway, working on that. Also a few other just here and there things to work on. The engine mounts and other parts that I said I'd have are live on my website. There will be a link in the description, so if you decide you want to build a truck like this, go ahead and check that out. But I think that's it for this video. We'll go ahead and back to building some dent sides.